Hey everyone, this is David, aka Coma 2000. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do mastering in VCV Rack. And what do I mean by mastering? Well, mastering is the final stage or final step before a recording is released. Whether you put it on YouTube or on a CD, it doesn't matter. And it's adding the finishing touches to a song so that it's more pleasant to listen to. And if you have multiple songs, then the goal is a bit different. You also want the different songs that come in a playlist, for example, to sound good once you play them one after the other. And the most basic thing here is just adjusting the volume. So you don't want one song to be very quiet and then the other one too loud. So at the most basic level, mastering is nothing else than adjusting the volume, but of course there is a lot more to it. And we are going to talk a lot about loudness here in this video. And there's going to be a lot of theory here, because I want to explain different concepts so we can understand what we are doing here in practice. And I have to mention that I'm not actually doing mastering in VCV Rack, rather I'm using a DAW, at the moment Reaper and Studio One 6 with different plugins. I've been planning to remaster my album, my first album Oceans, for a very long time, so I'm going to make a video about my actual mastering process as well, but this is sort of an introduction to that, because we will cover all the necessary steps and the different modules that we can use and different effects that we can apply. So let's look at the patch here on the screen and you will see what I'm talking about. So we have the audio coming in here. I'm using this player where I loaded in my track, and that goes in to the mixer here. And there's nothing mixed here because we only have one channel. Of course, you can do the same steps on each track and then mix everything together, but here I assume that you already have a basically finished recording. I mean, this song was already on an album, but I'm planning to remaster it to make it sound even better. So you have a basically finished recording that sounds good. And I played around with this. I should set everything back to the initial settings, and then we go into this mixer here, which is not doing much. It's just for me to adjust the input gain basically, so I can adjust the volume here and there so that we are not clipping. Like, that's the most important thing, try to avoid clipping. And then after the input gain that we set, we use different effects, and the most basic effect in mastering is the EQ. It's very effective, so you can change the sound of your recording quite a lot by adjusting the different frequencies. So that's what we are going to look at first, and then we are going to look at saturation. And I made a little combination of modules that we can use. I will add it later, and that adds some excitement or slight distortion to certain frequencies to make the sound a bit more interesting and exciting. And after that, we are going to look at compression. I have a couple of compressors here from VCV Rack, so we are going to compare them, but also I will explain all the different settings of dynamics, audio dynamics. And finally, we are going to look at the stereo image. So what we can do in mastering is widen or the stereo image or make it narrower. So for example, the bass, you want it in the center, maybe, and the higher frequencies on the sides in the stereo field. But there are a lot of small things that I will have to mention in this video. We are going to look at these simple one-band compressors, and then we are also going to look at multi-band compression. And with that, let's get started. So put your headphones on, because you will need them in mastering we are tweaking only very small things, so we are not we don't want to necessarily change the character of the recording. I mean, this is my song, so my recording, I can do whatever I want with it. I can completely transform it if I want, but usually if you're doing a remaster or you're mastering for somebody else, then, well, it depends on what they want, but generally you want to make only minor adjustment, as I said, so that it sits well on a playlist, or even a single recording fits in well with other songs on the radio or on YouTube. So with that, I think we are good to go, and let's get started. As I mentioned in the intro, we have the audio player here, which goes into the mixer, so we adjust the volume. You should watch not to clip, and I have a lot of there are a lot of sliders here to adjust the volume here on this channel and on the master, as you can see, so make sure you're not clipping anywhere. And first, let's look at EQs. The most basic EQ that you can have is this parametric EQ, where you have, in this case, 3 bands, a low, a mid, and a high frequency band. So we have the lows somewhere here, the mids here, and the highs here. But for example, on this EQ master, you have 4 bands. You have the low mid, the high mid, and the high frequency. But let's start with this most simple one. And this is great if you want to adjust the frequencies of any channel on the mixer or on the master. So I have this EQ master here, so we can visualize also the frequencies. And as you can see here, we have barely any low frequencies on this track. So let's play around with this. So I turn down the low, I can turn up the low, you can hear more bass. But you have to be careful here. If you're adding more of these frequencies, then the levels are going up, of course, and you're getting louder, so you are in more danger of clipping. That's why many people use subtractive EQ, where they only go in the negative direction and adjust the frequencies like that. So of course, if you go a lot less low and then turn the gain up here, then you can achieve the same effect as if you would add high frequencies. So let's try to add some highs here. Much better already. The mids, turn down the mids a little bit, turn down the low as well. And so this is quite echoey, as you can hear. So I wanted to have less mids, maybe a bit more low frequencies. Let's listen to the high frequency range here. What you can also do on the Mindmeld mixer is that you have this high pass filter where you can add basically a low cut. High pass is the same as low cut, so cut out the low frequencies below a certain range. Let me show you this. Like, you can already hear that we don't have that many more low frequencies. So if your mix at the bottom end is muddy, then you can play around with this. Let's set it maybe to 25 Hertz, so we get a clearer sound. And now let's look at the EQ master. So what we're going to do is, instead of going out from the EQ into the Bassmaster, which is just a master volume adjustment here now at the moment, not doing anything with it, it's all set to everywhere to 0 basically. And from there we are going into the audio module, so you can listen to the output on your headphones or speakers. And let's look at the EQ master now. As I mentioned, this one has 4 bands, And the low frequency, you can switch from peak to shelf. We're going to look at peak in a moment, but a shelf is like this. You can see you can set the frequency here. What do you want to adjust? Where do you want to have the low frequency band? You can do this on this module, of course. It's set somewhere, which I don't know where. And then you can increase the gain or decrease the gain. And this is called shelf because, well, because of the form of it. And then I'm going to explain this Q setting as well in a moment, but that we can see better on peak type of filter. So let's have a look at that. I mean, you could set this also to peak, but I'm not going to do that. So let's look at this frequency range. Let's set it maybe to the middle here. I mean, you can visualize it here, and then let's turn it up and listen. And now I don't want to clip here, of course. You can sweep also through this, and now let me talk about this Q setting. The Q, well, it's less complicated than it sounds. It's the definition of it is the ratio of the center frequency to the bandwidth. So if you have a fixed frequency, let's say we select 240 here, and what does it mean, bandwidth? Where do I look at the bandwidth? Here it's narrower, here it's lower. So what you want, I mean, that's how people in the industry define it, is that you have to look at 3 decibels lower than the peak here, and then divide the, well, I have to think a little bit. You have to divide the center frequency by the bandwidth here. So let me give you an example with more simple numbers. So let's say our center frequency is at 200 Hertz, and we go 3 decibels lower, and we look at the width of this, and let's say it's like 250 minus 150, so the bandwidth is 100. Then if you divide the 200 by 100, you get a Q of 2. Where are we? Oh, we have a Q of 3, almost. So let's go to Q of 2, and then you can see it. And in simpler terms, basically it's just to set the bandwidth. So the higher the ratio here, the narrower the bandwidth becomes. And this shape of this bell, or this peak, gets more peaky. And what you can use this for? I mean, what can you use EQs for? Like, first of all, you could use the EQ to correct some of the frequencies that you don't like. So you could sweep through the frequency range. I'm going to restart this recording now. Stop and play. So let's listen to the sound, and if you turn up the gain, you can sweep through the different frequencies, and you say like, here there's a sound that I don't like. Then you play around with the Q, and then turn down the gain, and then we will cut out some of these unwanted frequencies. But because this song is already published one, so I already put it out, I already did this initially, but now I want to remaster it, so I want to make it sound even better. But I don't have any frequencies I want to cut out. But this is an important point in mastering, that if you want to correct something, then you should do it before you are applying these more creative effects to enhance the sound. So correction first and then enhancement, because if you are not doing it in that order, then when you are adding these other effects, you might amplify the mistakes, so to say, or the unwanted frequencies. So you can use multiple EQs if you want. So you can maybe use this one to correct the sound that you don't want to have. I mean, cut out the frequencies you don't want to have, and then use another EQ after that to change the sound. So let's try to add even more highs to it, because we're already going into this EQ, and the EQ master is a module which goes with the Mindmeld mixer. So how are we connected here? I'm going, always the dark background is the output. So you're going from this polyphonic insert into here. So you can see we are on track 1 and 2, so it's stereo. So track 1, this is the left channel, and then track 2 is the right channel. No, it actually isn't. So it's tracks 1 to 8, but it's stereo, so that's great. I was worried for a second that we have to adjust the left and right separately, but thankfully, no. And this is an insert, so we're going into the EQ, and then we're going back out, and we're going in here. That's why these two go together. So we first go in here, as far as, yeah, and then we go the main output into here. So we have two EQs actually here, first this one and that one. So how about we set this back to the stock settings, and then, well, you can hear the difference. We do need these high frequencies. And now let's do the same thing here. So let's check the highs. This is also a shelf type filter, as you can see, but we can maybe change it to the peak and increase the Q. There's not much happening here anyway, so it doesn't matter if we go down a little bit. And okay, let's listen to this. Oh yes, and we are going pretty high here, so that's why people use subtractive EQ, so that we are not, we don't have this issue. It's the low mid. In mastering, you usually want very subtle effects, but here I actually want to get more highs, so I'm going to use this one as well to add the high. Yeah, we don't want that much mid. So you play around with this, and what's happening here, as you can see, we have the different colored lines, and if you add all those together horizontally, the changes here, then the sum of these changes is the white line. And you can hide it if you want, or show it, and you can also look at what the frequencies look before and after the effects that we apply here. And this kind of stuff usually takes a while, so play around with it and experiment with and then take your time always, and the more time you take, the better the result will be probably, but with these tutorials it's always the case that I don't want to spend too much time playing around with the different settings, otherwise it might get boring for you, I think. Let me know what you like and what you don't like, so I can make even better videos in the future. And yeah, I am pretty happy with this for now. Another thing we can do if you want to enhance these high frequencies is using saturation, but before that let's look at this final EQ that I have selected here. It's by Nano Modules, it's a small one. The benefit of this is that it's also simple like the EQS. It has 3 bands, just the low one is here at the bottom, mid and high. So what shall we do so that we don't cut out the sound too much? It's unavoidable, so we're going in here. So let's go instead of I don't want to get rid of this. Let's use 3 EQs. So let's go in here, and then from the input, the output to the input here. And I don't want to change too much here. The looping should be enabled here, so the song will start over. And I hope you like this recording of mine from my album, the first song, the first recording I made in a VCV Rack that I enjoyed listening to myself, so I hope you like it too, because you will hear it a couple of times in this video. I could listen to this over and over again, thankfully. I hope you too. Now let's play around with this here as well. Low. Let's listen to how this EQ sounds, because not all EQs sound the same. Like, okay, the look of the modules is different, but the sound of it is also different. So when you are trying to find out, find the modules that you like the most, it's of course the interface as well, but also the sound and the functionality. And what we could do is use this spectrometer here to actually visualize, if I could pick it, visualize the changes. So this is something like we have built in on this EQ master, but I want this post the effects. So let me go left and right. And now you see the stereo channels, and the mids. These are the highs, and then let's listen to the low. You can see the low frequencies coming up. If I turn it down, it will go down. That's the to less loudness here in decibels. So I just wanted to show you this module because it also has a built-in compressor. So if you also want to do compression, EQ and compression in one module, so you want to save some space, then you can EQ and compress with just one knob here the signal. But we are going to look at other modules with much more control. But if you just want to keep it simple, then you can turn up the compression here. And yeah, it also applies some gain correction, as I can hear. Because normally if you turn up the compression, everything should get quieter, but I will explain it in a moment. But first, let's disconnect this, because I don't want to use this module. It's just for visualization purposes. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to delete this. And let's see, we are going out from the EQS now. Let's go back into the Bassmaster and continue with the saturation. So the next stage is saturation, and of course you can mix up the order of the different effects. You can, depending on your goal, you can, for example, first compress and then use the EQ, or use saturation first and then EQ. You know, you can play around with changing the order of the different modules, and that's why this modular environment is so great, because you can just repatch everything and change the order of the effects. But what I want to do is further increase this high frequency range. So let's see where we are. Let's go from the main out, and which is basically the Bassmaster, which is the final module. So we can always see the frequencies and the loudness in decibels at every frequency. What I would want is a bit more highs still, so we could use a saturator for that, which is distortion, slight distortion, to add some excitement to the sound. What I want is to affect high frequencies. So what I have here is I built a little combination of modules and saved it as a selection. I'm going to share this on Patreon and part of this patch as well, of course. And it's the, I think, stereo drive Lala. You will see in a moment why. We only need one label. Because basically what I have here, let me show you in action. Is, well, another Mindmeld mixer, and what, left, right. So from the EQ, I can't hear anything in the left channel. I did something wrong. Okay, let's see. That's something, you can see it, it's a flat line, so that's fine. Here we have both, like we have the audio. We're going out, we're going, yes, here we have nothing patched in, of course. So I want to go from the EQ to the mixer here, and then the right channel here. And then once we go through here, then we feed the mix in to the left and the right channels. And let's see why we don't have any sound. Aha! Now we do have sound, but it's not what we want. So let's go through this little selection, as they call it, here. Now we go in. This is the sound from the EQ, and we go out. This again is just to add some gain. I like the Mindmeld mixer because you can add a lot of gain if you want. And now the Lala is there to filter the frequencies. So what I want is add the distortion with the SuperDrive Stereo FX only to the high frequencies. So we have the inputs here, and we feed the high frequencies into the SuperDrive, but then we want to mix in the original sound. So I'm going to add this. Aha, and now we're good. And I'm going to save this again because these two cables were not connected initially, so you can save the selection. here. And I'm going to overwrite this. Yes. Yeah, don't do this, but I think we'll be fine. Now, so we have the drive, the distorted sound mixed with the original, and here you can set the mix. But I use this macro module so that I can turn with one knob both of these X-Fade modules by Bogaudio, because this is not stereo and I want to affect the left and the right channels. So this just shows how it is mapped. So how you map it is you click here and then you click wherever you want to map or unmap. So let's map it again. You click here and then I want this and this knob to be turned with this knob only. So now you see if I turn this one knob, it turns both of them. And if I go left, I'm mixing only, crossfading, but I'm mixing, this is the original sound that we got now. But I want to add some distortion. We could listen to the distortion only if we want, so let's hear what that sounds like. Yeah, like not much, because we have everything very low here. Let's say I want to affect, and you can see the frequencies here, maybe everything above 1000 Hertz, or say 1100, but you go by ear, so, and then you turn up the drive, and it gets louder, but it also gets a bit of the distortion, and then you can set the tone here, what kind of distortion effect you want. Yeah, I don't want too much, so let's keep it low. Let's set the tone. Maybe only the higher frequencies. And as you turn up the gain, like now the high frequencies will get louder, so and you could do it with the mix as well. So now we don't want only the distorted sound, but we want the original sound too. And not 50-50, but let's say like this. And now it's a let's turn up the gain here. And I really like this because you can add like even more gain here. So that's the distorted sound. And this is just to add some analog feel, like an overdrive effect on the high frequencies. Let me turn up my interface and let me listen to this carefully. And this, usually takes time, so play around with the different knobs until you get the sound that you like the most. But I'm quite happy with this as we are. I don't want to spend too much time in these videos on, adjusting the knobs too long, so that it doesn't get boring. And with that, I think we are good to go with compression, which is a big topic. So let's start with this first compressor that I have here. And let's patch everything in. We're going from the drive, so this left and the right channel from the mix instead of the Bassmaster. We're going to go first into the compressor. In. It's on a dark background, but it doesn't matter. And out is red, so we go in. Again. And now, let's look at this module. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can, maybe we also put this on the other side. So we can see, I can't seem to grab this. Now we did it, okay. And I have something here hidden. Now you've seen it. So, let's get started with compression. And before we can talk about compression, we have to talk about loudness, of course, because the first thing you see here is like the decibels in volume, and also the levels on the that are shown here with these 4 bars, and these are loudness measures in the RMS standard. So I want to explain to you what we mean by RMS, loudness. I mean loudness measured in this RMS format, and then we're going to talk about also LUFS or LKFS, which is another measure of the loudness, and this is very important in mastering, and compare that to peak and true peak. So you know about all these terms, because then you will understand, because this is the RMS visualization within 100 milliseconds and this within 300 milliseconds, and so that this all makes sense to you and you understand how we are reducing the gain and the loudness here. I will now explain these things. Now let's talk about compression, and this is kind of a big topic, and if you already know about compression, then feel free to jump ahead in the video, but I'm going to show you this through the bar module, which if you look at the manual for it, which is here, then you can see that it is a stereo peak compressor showing 300 millisecond and 100 millisecond RMS of the signal. Nothing really crazy, the controls are standard. So this is what we get in the manual. So it supposes you know what all the different settings on the basic settings, the standard settings are on a compressor, and also what 100 millisecond RMS means. Now I will try to explain this to you as well as I can. If you look at the bars here on the compressor, this just shows the loudness. So this is basically like this here, which if you go up, then you are louder, if you go down, then you are quieter. And possibly this is also RMS here, which is just an average of the loudness over a time interval. So that's why these going up and down movements are smoothed out, because they are smoothed out over 100 milliseconds, I suppose here in the middle, and because on the sides it's moving even smoother. That's the average over 300 milliseconds, or about 1/3 of a second. Now, RMS in maths stands for root mean square. So basically what you have here, let's see, and I will explain this. You have a set of numbers, and the root mean square of the set of numbers is the square root of the set mean square. Okay, you have to think about this, but it's actually easier to look at the formula. So we have discrete numbers. What are these discrete numbers? In our case, these are the loudness levels, and I will talk about sample rate in a moment, and you will understand. So if our sample rate is 44.1 kilohertz, that means that we are taking the analog signal and we are sampling it. So we are breaking it up in 44,100 pieces, and then we check every split second, 1/44,100th of a second, what the loudness is, and you get a number. You get 44,100 numbers in a second, or 4,410 in 100 milliseconds. Let's think about 100 milliseconds, 1/10 of a second. You have these 4,410 numbers, and well, this is what the module is doing for you in the visualization, but so that you know what that means, is you take these 44,000, or whatever number of numbers, this set of numbers, and you square their value, you sum them up, and then you take the mean, the arithmetic mean, so you divide by the number of values that you added together, and then you take the square root. So this is just the formula, but what it does, that it averages out the loudness of the signal over a period of time. And in the digital realm, we have discrete numbers, but if you have an analog signal, then you can do the same, but instead of summing, you would have an integral. So you have the time period from the beginning to the end, and then you sum together or integrate the square of the values over this time period, and then you divide by the length of the period and take the square root of that. So that's integration in a nutshell for you. But in the digital world, we don't have to worry about integrals because we have discrete values, and in any case the module is doing this for you. But hopefully now you understand what RMS means, and now I will tell you what we use it for and why we use it. Well, the point is that we could look at the actual peaks, and we will talk about peaks in a moment, which are the voltages that are shown here. But the RMS approximates better how humans perceive music. So that's why we show this average over a short period of time rather than the signal moving up extremely quickly, up and down. Now, RMS is not the only measure, not the only average measure of loudness over a period of time, and you might have heard about LUFS or LUFS, also called LKFS, which is another formula, basically another method of calculating the average loudness of a song. And let me talk about LUFS now. It stands for loudness units relative to full scale, or loudness K-weighted, which is a method of averaging relative to full scale. And this is basically the standard way of measuring loudness in music and TV and broadcasting and so on. And now, what's the difference between this and the RMS, and why is it used? And then we talk about why it is important for us. Well, according to a study, and this was in 1933, and you can read up on this on Wikipedia by Fletcher and Munson, they introduced so-called equal loudness contours, which actually describe the relationship how we perceive sound at different frequencies. Because the human hearing, even if the value at different frequencies, let me show you. So if you have, let's say, minus 24 dB at 100 Hertz, and you have minus 24 dB at 5000 Hertz, we will actually perceive the higher pitched sound louder. Like you might have heard this if you have like terrible frequency and really loud that it's kind of piercing to the ears. So this is what we are doing when we are EQing as well. We are trying to remove the frequencies that are not so pleasant to the ear. So basically Fletcher and Munson, in their paper, which I'm going to tell you, it's called Loudness, Its Definition, Measurement and Calculation, which was published in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America, described this, introduced how these contours, and made an empirical study, actually, how different frequencies at different levels are perceived by human beings. And of course, everybody perceives sound differently. Our ear canals are different and very complex. But And that's why mastering is so difficult, because everybody hears music differently. So we want to, you can use your own ears and try to, you know, make the best sound possible. Since then, these Fletcher-Munson curves have been kind of superseded, or some part of it, and there has been newer research since, which are now part of the ISO standard, and so we preferred to use loudness contour measure as the term. So this is the theory, and it's amazing, but what does it mean for us? Now we are going to talk about this more at the end of the video, when we have our finished master and I'm trying to pull it up to a certain level of volume. So we will try to average out the volume, or the loudness rather, of the entire song. So it's similar to RMS, but we will use this other method to calculate the average loudness. And you might know that some platforms have different standards of what kind of loudness maximum or minimum they expect. In television it's minus 23 dB full scale, but on YouTube the common wisdom is minus 14. But of course it depends on your song as well. If there's more dynamics in it, you might not be able to achieve that loudness. And also we will see that you might pull up the loudness, but then you will clip, because there are these peaks which are outside of the average, and they might be higher than 0 dB. So you have to balance in mastering always the average value over a certain period of time, the entire song, but also watch out at how high the peaks are. And now we are going to talk about peaks, about these peaks, and we're going to talk about peak and something called true peak. Like the peaks, that's very simple to see. The peaks are here, the maximum values. But again, we are going back to the difference between analog and digital, so that we can understand the term true peak. Because now we know, okay, the LUFS and RMS are average values over a time period, whereas the peak is the actual value at a moment in time. But what's the difference between peak and true peak? Well, for that I have to talk about sample rates and bit rates, and this is fairly basic stuff. So if you, for those who've learned about this, but I'm making this video if you haven't heard about it, I'm very happy to explain it to you. Hopefully you find it useful. And we are going to talk about sample rates and bit rates, but for that it's easier if I show you this on the screen. So in the digital realm, what happens is we have this sound wave here, which is continuous, and as I mentioned earlier, let's say we have a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz. What does it mean? Well, we learned about hertz before, or I talked about hertz before in my favorite modules series. I will link to the video below. And what this does is that we take the values of the sound wave, but because in the digital world we have only discrete values, we cut up the sound. So let's say we have 1 second of sound, like this one here is 1 second. There can be, like the sound waves can be different, of course, that doesn't matter. We have 1 second, and then we cut up this 1 second into 44,100 pieces. And if we have 48 kilohertz, into 48,000 pieces, and then we assign a value to each of those sections, or each of those columns, so to say. So the height of the column, we look at the height of the column, and that's the value that approximates in the digital realm the value of the continuous curve the best. So that's sample rate. And the higher the sample rate, of course, the more values you get, the smoother your approximation is. And yeah, there's a debate, you know, can you hear the difference between 44.1 and 48 kilohertz, you know, CD quality audio and else? 96 kilohertz, 192, like you definitely cannot hear it. But you know, why does this interface go up to 192 kilohertz? Well, that's because if you want to work on your audio, so you want to apply a lot of effects, especially if you want to slow it down, for example, then it's always good to have more information, because some of before we transform these values, you know, before we destroy everything. So higher sample rate is good, is very useful if you want to edit your audio, but otherwise I'm usually working in 48 kilohertz. And now let's look at the bit depth. That's actually even simpler to understand. Well, we are again in the digital world, so well, maybe an example I will give you. Let's say we want to measure, I mean, here we are measuring the loudness. Let's say we want to measure the height of people. And this is like a high school example. So you have a high school and you have kids in the classroom, and you know, someone is 152 centimeters and you measure the other person 158, 179, 182. So let's say our scale goes from 0 to 300. Now we have how accurate can we be with this scale. Like we can be accurate to 1 centimeter, but the person is actually not 172 centimeters tall, but 172.3. For that we would need to go from 0 to, let's say, 3000 units, which are now in millimeters. So now we can calculate even more precisely, but that person is not 172.3 centimeters tall, but 172.35 or 34 and so on. So the more granular you go, the higher the resolution of the scale that you are using, the more accurately you can represent the actual value. So, and this is what the bit depth represents, and it's in binary. So let's say if you have you know, you have 100 values, that's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, so like 2 to the 6th is it? To the 7th, okay, because the 8th is 256, 500, 1000, okay. Yeah, it's good to be able to convert these things into binary more quickly. So let's say you have 10 bits, and that would be like a 10-bit color, so you had 2 to the 10th different values, 1000 values. So if your monitor can show, let's say it's from white to black on a 10-bit scale, that means you have 1000 different values going from white to black. But if you have 12-bit color or 14-bit color, then your scale is finer, and you can represent the actual colors in the world more accurately. And then this, or the same goes for audio. The higher the bitrate, the more granular your scale is, and the more precisely you can represent the different values. Of course, the drawback of these are always it's more values and it's more data. So, and at some point it doesn't make sense to go higher. So, because it's difficult to understand, it's actually impossible to hear the difference. So now that we have covered bitrate and sample rate, and this will be useful for us in the future, now we can talk about true peak compared to peak. And well, this will be a perfect example here. So let's say that we have then, and all of this has to do with these inter sample peaks of the actual audio. This can cause a problem in the digital analog conversion both ways. When you're going from analog, so let's say from the microphone to digital into the interface on your computer and saving it as a WAV file, and the other way around. For us now, we will be more concerned about digital to analog. So you have your music and it's your sound, and it's digital, it's in WAV file, but then it goes into your headphone. And what happens here is that we have our peaks, right, in discrete values. But when you go, this is the time scale, so you're going, let's say, up, but you only have a sample here and a sample here. However, the actual value that will be produced is higher up. So if you set your level to 0 dB, so just at the clipping limit, peak, then it might happen that the sound actually, and as we perceive it, and as it is reconstructed, goes above that, and we are clipping. Like one way to avoid this is to master to -1 dB peak, and then hope that we don't go above 0 true peak, or just use true peak metering, and many of the plugins and have that, and that's why I'm using a different plugin for the final master, because you can also, one of the reasons, you can see your true peak levels. And how that works is that it oversamples the audio, so you get even finer on the horizontal scale, and it can calculate the actual peak values more accurately, and you can avoid peaking, because of course you could always pull down your audio, but you are trying to make it probably as loud as possible. So, and that's one of the things that you have to be careful about. And I think now we have learned a lot in this section, in this segment. So you learned about different loudness measures, integrated and just-in-time values. So you learned about RMS versus LUFS, and also peak and true peak. We learned about sample rates and bit depth. So now we can continue with VCV Rack. And let's see where we were. We were at this metering, right? So let's get to compression. You have your loudness here, and what the compressor does, that if you go above a certain loudness, then it will attenuate the signal, so it's going to make it quieter, but only the sounds above this threshold. Now, why would you want to use a compressor in the first place? Well, it's kind of obvious on the, if you are recording your voice in, and you have a lot of dynamics in your voice, then, and that's what they do on the radio, they compress the sound together so that even the quieter parts get louder and the loud parts get quieter, so the sound is more even. Now let's look at this in practice on this compressor. Let's say that I lower the threshold here, and I will turn down the ratio first. Then this means that everything above this value here will be, well, compressed. So everything that goes above this will be divided by a number, and that number is the ratio here. So if I turn this up, and you can hear the signal getting, the sound actually getting quieter, because we are making everything that is up here quieter. And on the right, you can see the amount of compression that we are applying. Okay, so this is without compression, and you know, you don't always want to compress the sound, so maybe, you know, I don't want to add any more compression to this because I'm happy with the dynamics of it. But for example's sake, let's play around with the threshold and the ratio. So if I, you know, you can set the ratio wherever you want if you are never going above the threshold. And it's the, let's say I want to compress it a little bit, maybe because I want to make the sound louder. And this is, you know, you probably heard about this, these loudness wars. Like at some point in music history, maybe 10 years ago, everybody tried to master their songs as loud as possible because they wanted to stand out on the radio. So if a song your song came and it was louder than the one before, then of course loudness demands our attention, so we tend to pay more attention. Probably something similar they are doing in commercials. It's like, which is legally it's supposed to be the same loudness, but you know, they play around with the different frequencies and compression so that we actually perceive the sound louder than it is. So they conform to the law, to the rules, because they are at a certain loudness, but still we hear it differently. So either the rules are wrong, or yeah, probably, because you can, if you can use certain tricks to make your audio sound louder than it is, then, and now you know how to do it, I think, especially if you study which frequencies we perceive louder and look at what kind of loudness measure they prescribe, then you can get around it if you want. But this is not our goal here. What our goal is to you know, make our song as pleasant sounding as possible and not necessarily as loud as possible, because what happened in the loudness wars, because what, you know, you pull down the threshold, you increase the ratio, but then you turn up the makeup gain. And we would have to monitor the loudness, of course. Yeah, but now the song is finished, so let's start over. Before everything breaks here, let me save. Okay, now we're good to go. You can hear the compression, yeah. It doesn't sound good, yeah, because the whole point of this song is that it gets louder and quieter and it goes like a wave. So this is just for a demonstration's sake. Like, I don't think you want extra compression here. And we have like a very high ratio. Like a normal ratio, like a low ratio will be between like up to 2. So here we have the master module, so we can, you know, check that we never go above 0. So you can always turn this down. You can compensate here as well if you want. So now we have a tiny bit of compression. Actually, let's turn down the makeup gain, so we see how much compression we are adding, and we can make up for it here if you want, instead of this knob. I wish the, okay, here you can look at here what the buttons mean. So, you know, it depends what you want. On different instruments, you can apply this effect very creatively. On the master, you want to be very subtle if you want to use the compression. Maybe if you want to make it louder, or just you know, maybe you can also, I don't think with this module, but with some other, you can attenuate certain frequencies if you want, only the high frequencies. So for that you would have to filter it and then mix it back together. But maybe there is another module where I can show this to you. So that's why I have several compressors, because they all do the same thing, but you know, they have a different interface and different features and different sounds sometimes as well. So you want to find the compressor that you like the most, because they don't all sound the same. Now, I can hear the exciter or the saturation on this that we added. I've heard this song many times, so I can recognize like the difference between before and after. Because when you are mixing or mastering, you probably know this. You listen to your song over and over again, so I hope you're enjoying this. Now, 2 more basic knobs that we have to understand when it comes to compression. and that's the attack and the release. And obviously this is dynamic here, so it's moving in time, so we are going up and down very quickly. And the moment we go above the threshold, the compressor can be set to how fast it should react. So if you set the attack time faster, then once the signal goes above the threshold, it will start compressing after 20 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds, and maybe 10 milliseconds is kind of short. And then if you turn it up, then it will compress only after a longer time. But 30 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds is still a very short amount of time. But I recommend you to play around with this and then listen to the difference in sound, because it's useless to explain this. Rather, the best thing is to play around with these knobs and then listen to how fast attack times sound and how slower attack times sound. There are creative uses of compression. You can apply several compressors one after the other, maybe one fast one and then a slower one. Maybe on the master you want to just smooth out everything, so use a slower attack time and or longer attack time, I mean, and longer release time as well, just so that the whole mix sits really well. Every sound sits well in the mix. Like sometimes they say to glue the whole mix together. Well, our mix is now just this one channel, of course, but it's already mixed together. But if you want to use compression to alter the sound, maybe it can help. And like if you turn up the attack time very high, like 100 milliseconds, let's listen to this. Let me turn up the ratio as well so we get more compression. I'll add some makeup gain. So this is the slow attack time, and let's make the release time also slow. So that means that it's going back slower when we get below the threshold. So this is moving the amount of compression. This is what shows the amount of the compression applied, is like moving up and down slower. So it's not so erratic, because if you set this very fast, let me show you the attack time. And now the attack is fast, so it's going down fast, but it's going up slow. But if I set both of them low, then this will move up and down very quickly. And this can be kind of disturbing to the listener. So you have to play around with this and trust your ears to find the right setting for the attack and the release time. So these are the basic controls. And now let's see what this module has to offer beyond the basics, because it actually has has cool features. One of them is that you can also set the knee of the compression curve, and unfortunately this module doesn't have a visualization for the compression curve, so I'm going to show it to you here. And I connected the audio out to this compressor as well. And well, we're going to look at this module next. So I just want to explain to you this compression curve, and for that I also have an image prepared here via Google. And as you can see, this is on the iZotope website, so I absolutely recommend you these articles, and I might link to them, Digital Audio Basics, where it's all explained really, really well. And this is also from iZotope, where they explain everything, how audio compression works. So if you are still unsure after this video, definitely check it out. And well, this is another way of visualizing the amount of compression that is applied, and it's kind of a shame that this module doesn't show the levels as it's coming in, and the input and the output levels, because then we could see it even better. But this will have to do. So you have your input level, and here the input level is on the horizontal axis. So here you are quiet and you're going louder, quieter, louder, quieter. So this is our volume in decibels. And you set the threshold, right? We have to think horizontally. And here nothing is happening because it's 1 to 1. So if you're at 20 dB input, you're at 20 dB output. You're at 40 dB input, you're at 40 dB output. But, so let's do that. You set it to minus 40 dB, right? Let me turn on this ratio. I wonder why nothing is happening. Because we are going in. We have this ratio set. It doesn't matter. Maybe we have to connect the output as well before it starts working. But okay, back to the curve. So what's happening is that this is kind of important, because when we talk about limiters, as you can see here, this is set to a horizontal line, so you have infinite compression, but we'll talk about limiters in a moment. So you see, if you go, let's say here to 60 dB, then the output, if you had no compression, so your compression ratio would be 1, you would have the same output level as the input. But if your compression is at 2, compression ratio is at 2, then everything above this line, but only the values above this will get halved, right? So let's say you were at 60, then you will be here at like 40 plus 10, you would be at 50 dB. And when you are at 100, then here you would be at 70, right? So you are compressing the audio, you are making it quieter. And the higher the ratio, the lower the output level will be compared to the input level, or as a function of the input level. And so now we get to the knee, finally. What that means, the knee is, if you set this ratio, you see that there is like bend here, but it's very abrupt. If you want to smooth this out, so if you want, once you go over the threshold, for it to first start compressing slower and then smoother, then you set the knee higher. And let me show you that on the VCV screen. So if I turn the knee, where is it? Knee here. I'm turning it up. You should watch here. You already see this nice curve. So the higher the knee, the more curved this is. So you go over from the uncompressed values to the compressed values more smoothly. So that's very difficult to hear, of course, but like you can get it from 0, you can go up to, the maximum. And what happens here is that once you go above the threshold, it doesn't start compressing at the ratio that we set, but first it goes from 1 to 2.6 in a more smooth way. Now, next knob, the makeup, we already covered it. And then you also have this mix knob. So this module is fantastic. It can do parallel compression, because this is what it's called. This is just a mix knob. So basically you are mixing the dry signal with the wet signal, the uncompressed sound with the compressed sound. So you still can mix in your original audio, so you're not compressing everything, just 70% of it, right? You have 70% of the compressed signal and 30% of the uncompressed, and this parallel compression is kind of popular right now. Again, it is something that you would have to take your time and listen and hear if you like it, because you can do whatever you like, trust your ears and play around with this. And now we also have this final knob, which is called Lookahead, and For that again, we can go a bit into theory if you want. So I'm going to explain to you Lookahead compression. And after that, we are going to continue with the next module. Now, let me quickly explain what Lookahead compression means. Well, in case of the Lookahead compression, your compressor is able to see the incoming signal a few moments before it is being processed. So, and you can set the time here. So if you set it to 50 milliseconds, then what's happening inside the module is that your signal is duplicated, and then the compressor reacts to one of these signals, but applies the compression to the other one. So basically, it can see the future, it can look ahead. And why is this useful? Well, because of the transients. What are transients? You might have heard this, are temporary oscillations that occur in a circuit because of a sudden change of voltage. So, these are the changes in the volume, and if it's very sudden, then even if you set your compressor to a fast attack time, it might still be too slow to react to it. So the result of this Lookahead compression is smoother sound and probably more pleasant to the ear. So what are these transients? You have hi-hats. We don't have any in here, but let's say drums and hi-hats and these sounds. With the use of Lookahead compression, you can avoid clipping the signal. So I will recommend this to you if you have more percussive sounds, and experiment with it, how your audio sounds with a Lookahead and without Lookahead. And now let's continue with the next module. Before we get to the next module, the Manic compression, we still have these two inputs here, the sidechain inputs, and for that we have to understand what the sidechain is, and many effects have this input. So it allows for one track, let's say one instrument, to control the behavior of another instrument. So here we only have one track, but if you are mixing, then this is very useful because you can apply some creative effects such as ducking, which means that you reduce the volume of one instrument when a signal is present. So for example, you have a kick drum, and whenever the kick hits, you want to reduce the bass guitar or the bass coming from a synthesizer, so that they sit better in the mix. So you can, if you feed in an audio signal here, then it triggers the compressor to control the level of the track that's fed into the compressor. And it's very popular in EDM music, and you can create various effects with it. The next module, another compressor by Frozen Wasteland, which is the Manic compression. And it has some features that the other one, the bar compressor, doesn't have. So let's have a look at that. First of all, you have CV control for basically every parameter, including attenuverters. So you can change the threshold, ratio, attack, release, and everything else by modulating it, so you don't have to move these knobs manually, let's say based on, well, any parameter, but it can be automated using VCV Rack, and you can get really creative here. But now let's look at this module, and we already patched into the inputs, so let me just go to the output. Yes. And first I couldn't figure out why it's not doing anything even if I lower the threshold. I mean, it's doing something, but you have to put the threshold really low. And that's because, well, our input level is a bit low. So what we can do is either raise the level here. So let's do that a little bit. You know, you have to pay attention to the levels everywhere. We are clipping here, so let me turn this down. Now. Or you could increase the input gain here. So if I increase the input gain, then the module will be more sensitive to whatever we apply here. So it's great that it has an input gain, whereas this one doesn't. It just has the makeup, so the output gain, which is present here too. Now, let's see. Let's turn down the threshold. And set the ratio, and you can see that it's reacting pretty okay, because I set the attack to a longer time, so it reacts. Aha! You hear? Like, this is not good. So let's make the attack time even faster. And what you can do here also is you can change the curve of the attack. So you can maybe make it slower at first and then faster. So more sensitive, because generally these curves that are applied to the attack and release are linear, but here you can change that. So let's try to do that. So what we want is the attack to be slow at first and then faster. You know, so we have a lot of like high frequencies that are changing the tone, like the compression completely. And for that, what we can do is we can apply a filter. So maybe you only want to the compressor to react whenever the high frequencies go over a certain threshold. So for that, we apply the low pass filter. Now let's see what's wrong here. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's check the levels. Set the gain back. Maybe the audio a bit higher for you. That was quite nice. So what else do we have here on this module? Well, we have an RMS mode, so it only will learn about RMS, so it will calculate an average over a period of time, 3, 4, 5, 10 milliseconds, and then apply the compression based on that value instead of the peaks. We can set the knee, and we've played around with this before just to see the visualization, but now we can actually use it here as well. what else do we have? Oh yeah, we have a mid-side mode, and well, here comes another explanation. I will tell you what mid-side processing is, so that you know what's going on here. And it applies not only to compressors, but also EQ and saturation and all the other effects that you want to apply. And it's just another way to represent stereo sound, because we are used to left and right, but there's another way to represent the very same information, and that's by looking at the stereo channels in a way that we look at what is the same between the left and the right channels, and that's the mid channel, and then we look at what is different between the left and the right channels. And then you also again have two channels, but instead of left and right, now you have a mid channel, which is the sum of the left and the right channels, and you have to think about you know, frequencies going in the positive and the negative direction. So if you add together the left and the right channels, that will cancel out all the information on the sides. But if you, and that's the mid channel, or also called sum channel, and if you look at the difference between the left and the right channel, that's actually the side information. Because, well, logically, if you think about it, what is the difference between the left and the right is representing everything that is not in the center. So it's just a different way of encoding this, and I encourage you to look at the equations. For that, it's very simple, because the side is, or the difference is left minus right, and the mid or sum is the left plus right. And now if we check our maths and we try to go back from mid side, which are two channels representing stereo, to the left-right stereo representation, then if you add together, and I encourage you to write this down, mid and the side. What was mid? It was the left plus right, the side was left minus right. So if we add that together, we get left plus left minus right. We get two left channels, so we just divide this by 2 and we get to the left channel. And if you calculate mid minus side, so mid was left plus right, side was left minus right, then you have left plus right minus left minus minus right. So you have left minus left that cancels out, and the two rights add together, so you have two rights to R divided by 2, you have the right channel. I probably confused you, but I linked to Wikipedia or something, so you can check the maths. But the whole point about this is that mid-side is just a different representation of stereo, but what it is useful for is that if you only want to work on the difference between the left and the right channel, so the side, then you can change its character and make your mix or your master fuller or wider. So mid-side processing is great for stereo, changing the stereo image, or maybe adding, you know, you can add, let's say, some saturation only to the sides, but the mid, which is, let's say, the bass, or, you know, the instruments that play in the middle, those will stay the same, unaltered. Now, there's a caveat here, and that's that if you work in mid-side, but, you know, it applies to any kind of stereo processing, but especially with mid-side, if you're working only on the sides, and then you try to play that on a mono speaker, then these changes will not be present whenever you play your recording in mono. So you always have to think about how your audio is going to be played, and maybe that's what you want. You want a nice wide stereo image, but you want those effects not to be present on the mono recording for some case. If you expect people to listen to it on a mono speaker, like I have one, a little one for the beach, and also you know, people listen to music on their phones and whatever. And I have a little story here. I saw a video some time ago. I'll try to find it, and it's about why dialogue is almost impossible to understand in movies today when you are watching them at home. So if you watch a movie and you can't hear what the actors are saying, it's not your fault. And apparently even native speakers need subtitles now. And this is very prominent with Christopher Nolan movies. Think of, you know, Tenet probably is the worst. Or, you know, Tom Hardy in The Dark Knight Rises. It's amazing movies, amazing actors, but the audio has received a lot of criticism. But what Christopher Nolan said is that when they were recording the audio and mixing and mastering, and they were doing it all consciously, they were doing it for cinema, for the cinema. And in the cinema you have surround sound, you have not only stereo, but, you know, much more complex speaker systems, and they were making the audio perfect for that, so the cinema experience. And if you're watching it on lesser speakers at home, well, that's your problem. No, that's not what he said, but basically these movies are for the cinema, so go to the cinema and watch them there. So he's a big fan of the cinema. But because people these days stream the movies at home, so I think more people see the movies on their TVs than in the cinema. It might be a bit counterproductive, but his aim was to have the best possible sound on the best possible sound system. And I get it. However, when you're mastering, it's like me telling you that, you know, this sounds great on my earphones, my headphones, my studio monitors, and I'm sorry for you that you don't have such headphones or speakers, and just buy better speakers. But actually, when you're trying to master, your goal is, well, it depends what your goal is. Maybe you want it to sound really good on, you know, in the disco, or maybe you want to think about how people listen to your music. And yeah, many people listen to music on their phones or with the Apple earbuds or on the TV or wherever, you know. So you're trying to make it sound at least okay everywhere, which is an almost impossible task. So that's why mastering is a bit challenging, because you have to try different speakers, you have to try different headphones, earphones, and try to make it sound good everywhere. Now think about people listening to music in cars. Like most people listen to music when they are driving, and now that's also a challenging environment because the driver sits on one side, the passenger on the other side, so they are not sitting in the middle of the stereo image, and it still has to be good sounding on a car speaker. And well, that's the story here. And let's continue with the module. We have looked at high pass filter mid side. You can compress the mids and the sides separately. Of course, CV control, input gain, we saw it. You can add output gain as well. But then you have to check that you are not clipping. Always check what happens after here. And many people would put a limiter at the end, and that's the proper way of doing mastering, is that you put a limiter at the end. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm trying to stay below 0, because we're going to pull up the levels later. And you have this mix knob, so you can do the parallel processing again, parallel compression. And there is this very interesting compression direction button here. And now we're going to see what that does. We have a little arrow pointing up there, so we are doing upwards compression if we push this button. And if the compression is set to upwards, then what happens that instead of lowering the gain for the signal that is above the threshold, we're going to increase the gain for the sound that is below the threshold. And this will make the quiet parts louder and the loud parts quieter, so we are still compressing, but in a different way, in a different direction. So now we have gain reduction here, but if I push this button, then we have gain addition. So let's see, whenever we are at a low level, we are adding some gain, and as our incoming signal gets louder, we add less gain. As you can see, as we get quieter, we add more gain, so it makes the quiet parts louder. Maybe that's what you want. Or maybe I think, okay, I made this song, but sometimes it got really quiet, and what can I do about it? Well, you can use upward compression. Maybe a bit more, change the threshold, turn it down a little bit, so the effect is not so strong, and you can adjust the other parameters accordingly. You can of course also bypass it, so you can hear the difference. So let's hear. This is without compression. Yeah, I set a subtle effect, but I can turn up the ratio, of course. And this is now not division, but multiplication, of course. So yeah, I wanted to push this. Yeah, so it's an effect that you can use if you want. But now let's look at the multiband version of the compressor, of this Manic compressor, which is a Megalomanic compressor. And yeah, I can hear the gain addition now. It's quite prominent. But let's continue with the multiband compressor. So let me disconnect this and then connect this here. The inputs and the outputs. And what I try to do here in the first place is set these EQ bands, because, well, the principle of behind multiband compression is that you first create EQ bands, EQ ranges, and then apply compression to these frequency bands separately. So maybe you want to compress only the high frequencies but keep the low the same, or you want to compress the lows and mids but keep the other frequencies the same. And here we have 5 frequency bands, and 1 and the 5 are low and high pass filters, and the mids are a peak type of filters, and you can set the bandwidth. So it's not a Q setting, but the bandwidth is basically the same as we learned about it earlier. And I try to set it in a way that it kind of sounds similar no matter if we have this on and off, and I found it kind of challenging to do that, and it's probably because you can't adjust the slope of the filters, but I tried my best. And you can use this for very creative effects. So like if I just change this band, frequency band, you can hear how much the sound is changing a lot. So if I bypass this now, this is the before and this is the after, and I try to get as close to the before and after as possible, but you have to fiddle around with it. And now Now the cool thing that you can do with this, you can change your sound completely if you want. So you can use it as an EQ and a compressor in one. And I already have some compression on here for some reason, because I turned up the input gain. Because at first I didn't know, as with this one, why it's not doing anything. But now if you play around with the input gain, the great thing is, or the makeup, is that depending what you want to apply the gain before or after the compression, is that you can pull up certain frequencies. So I have some popping and clipping here. Yeah, we're still okay with the CPU. Now, let's see. We have basically 5 of the Manic compressors here, and yeah, let's play around with this. So I pulled this up, right? But I want to compress it a little bit, so I turn down the threshold. Turn up the ratio. Change the knee. Increase the attack time, yes. Oh yes. And the release time as well, so that we get a more subtle effect. You can change the curves and everything else, as we've seen. And play around with the input and output. So you can hear what this is doing, and well, multiband compression is super effective, and I encourage you to experiment with this module. Oh, I took too much makeup here. And yeah, I think that's about it for the Megalomanic compression and multiband compression. You can also switch it to the mid-side mode. You have the mix knob. You can hear like before the compression, and because we increase the gains, you can maybe mix the two together. You can bypass it, so you can hear before and after compression. But also what you can do, you have all these inputs here, the ins and the outs, and then you can bypass the EQ section and go directly to the compressor. And you have many inputs here, CV inputs for the sidechain that we talked about earlier, and you have a band envelope input. So watch out, this is an output, this is an input. And with that, let's continue with the next module. And the next module is this comp module by Squinky Labs. It's a great compressor. So let me connect everything. And let's see what this does. Uh-oh. You can hear, oh, we have the limiter on because I played around with the limiter. And actually this is a great opportunity to explain to you what limiters do. Well, limiters are basically just compressors, but with a very high or infinite compression ratio. So, don't know if you remember the this here, this graph. if you set the compression very high, higher and higher and higher, what happens that is, as you go up in the input levels, if you go above 40 dB here, you see what happens to the output? You will stay at 40 dB. So even if you have 80 dB or 100 dB in, you get only 40 dB out. So basically it's like a wall, like a brick wall, so that's why they are also called brick wall limiters. And in some cases you can change the knee here maybe, and you can do soft limiting, where you have more gradual way of going from across the threshold, or hard limiting like this, where you just hit the brick wall. The soft limiters tend to start compressing at a high ratio before you hit the threshold. That's how it works. Now let's go back to VCV Rack and let's see that in action. And here this module is designed in a way that it uses a little of your CPU, so it has certain settings hard-coded in, so you only have the ratios 2, 4, 8 and 20. So let's try with a soft knee and a hard knee. So now we know what soft and hard knee is. Soft knee is when you set this knob, where is it? Here to a higher setting, and the hard knee is when you have it at a low value. Here you can't change how soft or hard do you want your knee to be, and you have only presets for the compression. But the point here is that it uses less of your CPU. So if you put this on each of your channels on your mix, then this is great for that. And also the limiter is a hard limiter. So let's now talk about that, but let's see the manual. So if you look at the user manual, hopefully my internet is working, yes. But it's fairly slow. Then you can see that comp is a conventional, yet highly refined compressor limiter. Most of the controls should be very familiar to us now, because it's just like any other compressor, and it's a feed-forward compressor designed for minimum coloration and distortion. So what does it mean, feed-forward compressor? And again, I try to explain this as well as I can. Most of the compressors these days are feed-forward compressors. In most compressors, what is regulating the level of the compressor is just the VCA. So you have this the detection. It's a VCA, a detector circuit, which checks the level and tells another VCA how to adjust the level, the audio level. So you have the detection, and then you apply this to another. You have a detector circuit, and then you have the one that is doing the compression. And this is actually what's called the sidechain. So you get the input from one place and then apply it to another place. And sometimes this is an internal source, as I said before, just now, and sometimes it is an outside source. And what we meant by sidechain earlier is that when you feed in the sidechain from outside of the module, but actually there is also this sidechain inside of the module. It's just not controlled by another channel, but the channel itself that you are using. And I can hear the limiter hitting hard, so let me kind of change the threshold. Let's turn up the threshold first. And let us see, what does it mean, feed forward? If comp is a feed-forward style compressor, then the question is, what is the other one? Of course, there's a feedback type compressor, and the most common compressors, the most modern compressors, are feed-forward designs. And how that works is, as we've seen, you are checking, the module is checking the levels, so you have a VCA basically, and that is the detector circuit, and then depending on that you apply the gain reduction to another VCA, which is responsible for the compression. Now the feedback style compressor, it's the other way around, so you are first compressing and then you are you're detecting your changes, which is kind of confusing, because how can you use detection of the levels after the compression? And well, in an analog circuitry, the electrons actually are moving fast enough so that the compressor might still manage to compress the signal without any issues. And the benefit of this feedback style compressor is that the compressor is reacting to the signals that are already compressed, so it doesn't have to spend that much time, which results in a smoother compression and less overcompression. However, so you get really nice smooth sounds, but the disadvantage is that you cannot control the attack and the release times so precisely. Now the other way around, this feed-forward style compressor, the drawback of that is that it can be quite erratic, and it can result in overcompression easily, as we've seen earlier in this video when I was just turning the knobs almost randomly, and you could see the gain reduction moving very erratically, and that doesn't sound very good. That doesn't sound smooth at all. And most compressors, of course, are feed-forward style, but I have to mention the SSL bus compressor, which I like to use on some of my recordings, especially if I want to release it beyond YouTube, because most of my stuff I just record everything in VCV Rack and then put it online. But if you're considering releasing your music on CD, or no, not many people listen to CDs anymore, but on streaming or other services, then you should consider using some plugins beyond VCV Rack, of course. And one of my favorite plugins is the software version of the famous SSL bus compressor, which is a feedback style compressor. And because it is a feedback style compressor, it results in a very smooth sound, so very pleasant. And the engineers, of course, have spent a lot of time perfecting this circuitry, and one of the tricks that they apply is that depending on the ratio that you set, they adjust the knee accordingly, so automatically. You can't set the knee there, but it's set automatically, so certain parameters influence other parameters, and they are optimized in a way that the sound is fantastic. So that's all about feedback style compression and the SSL bus compressor, which I hope to show you another day in another video where I'm showing you my actual mastering workflow. But for now, let's get back to VCV Rack, and let's look at what limiters do. And here it's again very useful if we look at this curve And what a limiter does, it's just a compressor with a very high ratio, because as you can see, the higher we set the ratio, the lower the output level will be once we go over the threshold in the input. Now, think about it. What happens if we set this to 100, 1,000, 10,000, like really high? What happens here is that no matter how high you go in the input level, you know, you are at 50, your output level will be 40. You go set it, you go really loud, you'll still be at 40. So the moment you go over the threshold, your sound will hit a brick wall, so to say. That's why these are also called brick wall compressors. And that's kind of a hard limiting as well. So you hit the brick wall and that's it. You don't get any louder, and it can sound very industrial and harsh. Soft limiting means that you are just applying a very high compression level with a softer knee. So as the goal there is that before you approach the threshold, you already start compressing, but very quickly. So you stay in this zone, like even if you would hit beyond, just before you hit the threshold, it will start compressing very quickly. And yeah, that's about limiting. And normally you would put a limiter at the end here so that you don't clip, but we're just monitoring the levels for now, and hopefully that will work. But we could put a limiter there, of course, or another compressor. So you can apply several compressors one after the other. So maybe you apply this maybe a fast compressor, then a slower compressor, and you put like a third compressor at the end as a limiter. So if you use like a 20-to-1 soft limiter, that's basically a compressor, I mean, that's basically a limiter, because you're trying to go above the level and it will compress it immediately, especially if you set the attack time low, because these limiters have also very, very fast attack times. So basically they are compressors with very, very fast attack times and a high ratio or infinite ratio. And here in this comp module, this is actually a hard limiter, and you can't set many of the settings. And the designers have made it so that it uses very little of your CPU. But the drawback of it is that you only have certain presets. So for example, you can set a soft limiter with a ratio of 2. But, okay, so ratio of 2, we know what that is. You set the ratio to 2. And then with a soft knee, that means that you turn up the knee here. So that's a soft knee. That's with a ratio of 2. And then if you set a hard knee, that's the same as having this ratio at 2, but the knee at a low setting. So you have this is a soft knee, and this is a hard knee. Now you see why. And you can have higher compression. Yeah, my computer just reached 100% for a second. Sorry about that. I'm going to delete this module just in case to save some of the CPU, and you can see like we are going back down. Now, what else do we have here? You can set the threshold. You have the makeup gain. Attack time. Also slower release time. You have the mix knob again for parallel compression. You can bypass it, in and out, and that's it. So this is like a super simple compressor. It's great for your mixes. So if you can put it on every channel if you want, and apply compression differently on each channel, and your computer will still not crash. And with that, let's look at the next module here, the ZOD compressor. And using this, I'm going to talk about a few things that we haven't seen yet, and that is a noise gate and an expander, because this is a complete dynamics processor with a noise gate, expander, compressor, and limiter. And here on the top row, you can set the thresholds for that. So let's use it as a compressor first, and then look at the other settings, other modes. You have this average. This is actually the RMS average again. So this is the time used for the, if you want to detect the signal with an RMS average. And this is happening because once you turn this knob, your signal is delayed by that amount as well, so that module has time to react to the changes. So let's turn this down to 0. Attack times, release times. This is for the limiter. You see it has a very fast attack time, 1 millisecond, but you can go to 0.1 millisecond as well if you set the limiter. We could set the limiter to, let's say, 0 dB. So now we have a limiter. And yeah, we are compressing. And here you have these lights. This unity light means that nothing is happening. There's no processing. This shows that the expander is on. That's what's going on. I have the expander turned up. I'll tell you about expanders in a moment, but let's play around with the compressor first. Attack, release, compressor. Yeah, we have to turn up the ratio, of course. Yeah, we would have to increase the input gain, I think. Here, the maximum, so let's turn it up here a little bit. Now, something is happening. You can hear it, but it's not good. We have to change the threshold, of course. It's in the first row. We are at minus 70 dB. Wow. Yeah. So we will have to go way higher than that. And what else is there? You can turn up the gain. On the output, you have makeup gain, and you can control the different thresholds here, not only with the knob manually, but also automatically via CV control if you want, and you have your sidechain audio left and right inputs. And as I said, the lights are showing whenever any of the module is on. We have the expander set to too high of gain. And now with that, this is a perfect opportunity for me to mention what an expander is. Well, an expander is the exact opposite of a compressor. As we know by now what the compressor does, it compresses your audio together, so either upwards or downwards, as we've seen before, but it usually makes the loud sounds quieter. So when you pull up the level, everything is more squashed together. And the limiter, well, it limits the dynamic range. And the expander expands the dynamic range. So, as I mentioned earlier, the effect of the compressor is less dynamic range. So if you want to have more dynamic range, then you would need to use an expander. And in this case, the loud parts will become even more loud and the quiet parts even more quiet. And here again you have two different types. You have the upward expanders and the downward expanders. So, I mean, upward expander and yeah, sometimes, you know, you have to think what it does. If the signal passes the threshold, it will amplify the signal rather than attenuate it. And with a downward expander, if the signal drops below the threshold, instead of amplifying it like an upward compressor, it will make it quieter. And that's the logic. You know, think through this again if you couldn't follow. I can hardly follow myself at this point. But I think that's all we need to know about expanders. Let's try to play around with it. You can see that we are getting louder. So let's turn up the expander. Set the threshold here. You can see now it doesn't sound good, but just for demonstration purposes, here you can monitor the initial audio level, or actually we are coming from here, but it really doesn't make much of a difference. As we are getting louder, this one gets even more loud, and as we get quieter, we will get even more quiet if we set the ratio here. You're multiplying by a number smaller than 1, so it's like dividing. And you have to set the frequency, I mean the gain, correctly. And yeah, that's about expanders. And we also have a noise gate here, and you might have heard of noise gates, for example, when you are recording your microphone. If you want to cut everything out below a certain volume, so for example you want to cut out noise, it's like the most basic form of noise reduction. If everything below 60 dB, which is very, very quiet, minus 60 dB, minus 50 dB, once we go down there, the audio will cut out, so you lose the noise. So let's say I'm talking, whenever I stop talking, the audio will be silent. And you've probably heard this effect on YouTube quite a lot, because people tend to overuse these things, and it's kind of distracting. So you be careful always with each of these settings. But let's try the noise gate. Like, let's turn up the... We are at, you know, minus 24, so we never get below, let's see where, about there. So let's set it higher than that. That's just for demonstration's sake. So everything below 30 should be cut out. Yes. So let's turn up the noise gate. Yeah, absolutely horrible sound. So this is not what we want to use, but just for you to understand what's going on. Once we drop below a certain level, well, this gate opens or closes, or however you want to see it. Let's say we close the gate and no more sound is coming out. And yeah, that's about it for this module. Of course, you have the lights here. So you have the limiter light, you have the compressor, expander light, and the noise gate. So let's turn this up. And now you see whenever the noise gate is kicking in, 0 to 100%. But because, as we've seen it a lot in this video, the actual peaks are going up and down very quickly. The problem here is that, you know, if you set it improperly, then the audio will cut out very briefly and then come back again. That's why we had this very strange sound, this terrible sound. And with that, let's now go to the Bogaudio module, the Pressor, which will be a great overview of like everything we learned about compression until now. And let's see what this module has to offer. So now we get to the final module here in this compressor section, and after that we only have the Bassmaster. And oh yes, the compressor is on. I already repatched it, so we are going from the ins here, and the outs we connect them there. Instead of here, we connect them there. These are the inputs: audio input, audio output. And you can hear the compression effect already, and it's not good. So let's see the controls. This module has a really nice interface and very logical everything. And this was the first compressor that I used in VCV Rack. But I don't like its sound that much. I don't know what you think about it. Maybe you do. But yeah, always watch your levels. Let's listen to it. So let's turn down the threshold. You see, we are already having some compression. If you turn up the ratio, you will get even more compression above the threshold. And then let's change the attack times. And the release times, 0. Oh, this one is in seconds, and this one is in milliseconds. You hear it's not good. With these settings, it's a user error. But for demonstration's sake. So you have the threshold, the ratio, attack, release, the same for controls that we had here and here. So it's the standard one. You have the input gain. So you increase the volume before it hits the compressor, and the output gain you increase the volume after compression. So this is just an amplifier. After the compression, this is an amplifier before the compression. And as you can see, you have CV control for that, so it's actually a voltage controlled amplifier. If you control this with control voltage, that's what this IGN and OGN means, input gain, output gain. You can CV control the attack, the release as well, the threshold, the ratio, and you have the envelope output. Well, let's have a look at this envelope output now. Let me have a scope and just output it so we see what's up. So you'll see like the compression that is being applied as the time goes by. Pretty cool. You can use this, of course, you can feed this, for example, into another compressor and then use it as a sidechain to control the compression on another compressor or any other module. So that's the amazing thing about the modular environment, that you can patch the cables in so many different ways, and you can get so many interesting effects if you want. What else didn't we look at? Input gain output. There's this inside detector mix knob, and this controls the detector circuit, and it's a sort of the mix of the input that we feed in. So this is the input and the sidechain input, if we would have a sidechain input. So you can crossfade the two. and get even more interesting effects. The knee, you can set it to soft or hard. We are at soft. And you have the detector mode, RMS or peak. RMS, as we said, it's averaging out the values. So if you set it to peak, it will react more abruptly, of course. And with this switch, you can change it from compressor to noise gate. We just saw noise gate here, so let's see how the noise gate works here. This is not what you want here probably, but yeah, so we are cutting out all the sound almost below the threshold. Yeah, so this is just so that you see what it does. And with that, we are actually finished with dynamics processing. So I say it's compressor, but it's actually dynamics, because we also looked at not only compressors, but also limiters and noise gates and expanders. So we covered everything here. And now we can get to our final module here, and I made a video about this for my Patreon already on the Bassmaster, and this is a very simple module to use to make your stereo wider. Well, just a quick recap. This is a two-band equalizer, basically. You have the high frequency and the low frequency, and you can adjust the gain, so you can pull up the highs and the lows here if you want, very simply. Let's pull up the highs. You can hear, okay. Now you have to adjust the gain, of course here the master gain, so that you're not clipping. And you can increase the bass as well, the low frequencies, and EQ it that way. And beyond this being a simple EQ, you can adjust the stereo width. So what you want usually is you want the low frequencies, and you can set the crossover here. What below this is low and above this is high. So let's say everything below 160 approximately will be our bass. And now if I pull down the width, then our low frequencies will be more centered in the stereo field, and you will hear even better if I turn up the width here. But I should get rid of this compression. Now I was just thinking that we applied all these effects here, and I think we made the sound worse than it was before. Is because we are going into this compressor here. So let's quickly go through it again and try to actually, make this sound good very quickly now that we have seen everything. So, but first let's finish here, and let me increase the stereo width so you can hear what's going on. So this should be, if you have your headphones on, you should have a wider stereo image. So the left and the right speakers in front of you virtually are kind of put further apart to the left and the right. So that's the kind of effect that you would get with this. So this is, if I turn, you can hear it. If you turn down the width, everything is in the center. And if you turn it up, you can have, now you have the high frequencies on the left and the right. This is a very powerful effect, so give it a try. And then you have the master gain. With the mix knob you can again do this parallel processing, that you mix the dry signal with the wet signal, and you can control the width, the low and the high width. So these two knobs, high width, low width, VCV control. So as if you were turning this instead of with your finger or mouse or whatever, you are doing it automatically. And now let's try to make this actually sound better, because we messed up a lot of things here as we were working on it. So what did we like the most? Up until here, I think we're fine. We just messed up the compression. So which one is your favorite compressor? For me, I really like this bar one. So we already have the input. So we just go in here and try to set it properly. But I don't even want to add much compression here. So like you hear what's going on. So let's maybe just add a tiny bit of compression to so let's make the ratio small, the attack time like this, release time let's say 50 and 40 and 80, something like that, with a soft knee. Let's put the mix to 100. We have some Lookahead even. Now turn down the threshold. Like this is how you usually go about it. You start pulling this down until you are happy with the sound, or until you are not happy with it, and then you pull it back up. And you listen through your whole song, and maybe over and over again, and you try to set all the parameters everywhere so that it sounds good. Not necessarily in this order, because if you change something here, you know, you might have to adjust something else up there. So it's an iterative process. You keep listening and listening and then changing. But as far as compression goes, you start pulling down the threshold and listen to the change. Turn up the volume on your computer. I'll be quiet. Yeah, the thing is, I don't even want to add compression to this because I've already compressed it. So more what I want to do with the mastering is, you know, re-EQ it and add this distortion effect to the high frequencies. And of course, because we have altered the sound now, we might need some compression. But I would actually prefer to only compress the high frequencies, and this module doesn't have it, so let's go to the Manic compression. I changed my mind. Let's use that. So as I said, the ratio is too high. Attack, yeah, we were at 40-80 approximately. Let's do that. RMS, we don't need it. Curve, oh yeah, we played around with this already. We have the low pass filter on, so that's the point here. I don't want it to react to the low frequencies, so I guess we need a high pass filter then. We can have both. Wow. Let's make it a bit more even smoother. Yeah, so I'm happy with this sound. And yeah, we are finished with the mastering process. So now we just have to listen to it before and after. And as a final step, I'm going to normalize the audio level. So our final output is basically as loud as possible. So I'm going to normalize it to -1 dB true peak in RX, iZotope, loudness control. So we'll see that. But first, what we need to do is play our recording again and then record the output. I will do that and I will see you in a moment. And actually, I just realized that I forgot this. I've hidden it so well that as you've seen it before, on the left side, I just realized that I forgot to explain what this is. So actually, before recording in, let me show you what I wanted to do here. So we're not using any compressors anyway, so let's just go back to this compressor here. And I wanted to show you the sidechain, but the one with an audio input. Now we have both channels, fantastic. And let's say we have a drums here, because this only makes sense if we have more than one channel. So I will output it here, and this song is in 110 BPM, so I will put some bass drum on the track just for demonstration purposes. So we have the clock, we input the gate, and now we have a drummer drum on this. But now the problem is that, you know, whenever the level gets high here, the two frequencies kind of clash. Yeah, so I'm not going to make this kick drum very, it's not the best at the moment. Let's hold it for longer. Tune it maybe. Okay, now quick and dirty here. So we have the output, right? So we input that into the sidechain input of the compressor. And now you see what's happening. Yeah, we have to pull down the threshold, of course. So this is an extreme effect, but just for demonstration. And you can see, and maybe we can input it to the right as well, but whenever the kick is hitting, the compression kicks in on everything now. So yeah, that's not what we want. So because, you know, it compressed the bass drum, which was already on the mix with the bass drum, so that's why we had this extremely strange effect. Now we are just compressing the whole thing whenever there is a signal coming out from here and going in there. So now what we would need is another mixer, right? So let me add another mix master. And let's see, let's do this. Let's finish this. So we have our signal coming into the Bassmaster from there. So let's put that into the first channel and then go into the input here. So nothing changed now. Maybe the levels changed. I have so many VCAs here. And now we feed in the kick drum right here, so that we don't apply the compression to the kick drum. So this is our master mix now. Aha. Very good. And you can change the threshold, of course. And the song is over. That's playing from here. Our kick is still going. And I think for demonstration purposes, this will suffice. What the sidechain means. I forgot to mention it earlier when I was talking about it. So this is just, well, we are lucky that I noticed this in the patch as I was zooming out earlier. So let's get rid of all of this and then record in our patch. So let's delete this. And now, where is our signal chain? Let's see. We have audio here, we have audio here, we have audio here. We of course don't have audio in the Bassmaster. And what I would suggest is that we skip all the compression because I just didn't like it very much. So let's go into the Bassmaster. From the mix, oh, where are we going from the mix? Oh yeah, we are going here now, of course. So let's just go directly into the Bassmaster. And yeah, I might apply some a bus compressor at the end or something like that. Or maybe the SSL high frequency compressor. I would do that before the final mix, but you know, let's do this in VCV Rack. Or we no, we're good to go. Let's finish up everything. Let's check the levels. Everything's fine. I'm going to stop this and I'm going to start the recording. So like this, and let's listen to the end result that we have here. You can of course skip this if you want, and then we get to audio normalization using LUFS, and then we are all done. Yeah, now I'm just praying that we are not clipping, so you know, I'm pulling this back down, and we have way too many VCAs here, of course. Too many potentials for error, so you rather go with lower gain and then pull it up afterwards. So let's see. Because we added these EQs, right, and we didn't use the subtractive EQ technique, so we are actually increasing the volume, so we have to pull down the gains everywhere. Here will be fine. Here I'm gonna pull it down. We're fine, we're fine. Yeah, we are at quite low level everywhere, so we should be fine. So let me stop the recording and then start again. And okay, I think this is it. Now I have RX, the RX audio editor open here, and it brings up the waveform statistics immediately. So we are at a true peak level of minus 14 dB. So yeah, we could have raised the levels way more, but I didn't want to clip anywhere. So you can see the RMS values, nothing clipped, of course. And then the integrated loudness is at minus 30 LUFS. So if you calculate the average loudness using those methods that we discussed earlier, then you get the minus 30. Of course, if we'll change the true peak, let's say to -1, then this will go up. So let's try to do this, and then you can set a lot of things here. So let's aim for minus 14 LKFS, and then let's say -1 true peak, and then let's render it. Yeah, we don't need this. Tolerance, the permitted margins. Yeah, we can, because what can happen here if you pull up the integrated loudness, the loudness that you will clip, so, it will balance this out perfectly. Or you could just normalize to -1 true peak and then see what our LUFS are. So, but let's render this out now, and then see what's happening. And it's working. And the result will be, hopefully around -1 true peak, and definitely, well, we'll see. And the LUFS, -14 maybe. Let's see how close we get. Here we go. We can see all these statistics very nicely now on the screen, how the integrated value changes over time as well, the momentary peaks, short-term RMS peaks. Yeah, let's see. I am very curious. Oh, and we got it. So we are at -1 true peak and -14 LUFS, and yeah, I think we got pretty lucky, and I can't really believe this, that we have -1, -1 both on the left and the right channels. So there's no difference between the sounds, between the loudness on the two sides of the headphones. So yeah, the numbers look great, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the sound. So now we have the same sound as we had before that you just listened to, but louder. So if I upload this version to YouTube, then we are at -1 dB, so we are not peaking. And we are also hitting the target of the integrated loudness. So if we look at the entire tune here, of course, this will make the average lower. And whenever we are louder, it will bring up the average higher. Overall, we are at -14 loudness units, K-weighted, full scale. So I'm very happy that this all worked out. I hope you found this interesting. I mean, if you watched it until the end, then you probably are curious about mastering and how to do it in VCV Rack. And thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, this was fun. I'm going to make some more videos probably on mastering because I want to show you my actual workflow. So stay tuned. See you soon. Have fun. I'm going to upload everything, of course, the patch and so on. So just load in your sample into the sample player, the wave file player, and try to EQ and compress and add distortion to your track and play around with the stereo width. So all these effects that we discussed today. And you can also change the order of the different modules, of course, so or add some more EQ or several compressors after each other, as we discussed in this video. And with that, I say goodbye. Take care. Peace.